All right, so I want to show you guys how I use Teams and what I expect from you in Teams. So it starts out with, this is how I have mine set up. That's what I was looking for, was how to change the views. So if you have the boxes and you like the boxes, then you keep it that way. Or the other choice is not that button. If you go to settings and switch view, you can change. Oh, this is what you can change the way your teams are organized. So now my teams are in the list here. I might actually like that better. I'm not sure which way I like it better, but you'll see that I made the teams, the little icon, it should say, I can't handle it. Oh wait, I bet if I do this, I can see. So I made it say ES, so Earth Science class, period 5/6. That's you guys. Did you find that? Now, one thing I did notice in my other classes are you might still have your teams from last year on there, and they might be cluttering up your list of teams. You can delete or you can hide them. You can't delete them. I can, you can't. I don't think you can. If you click the three dots, the first option I think is to hide. So if your living environment team is there and you don't want it, hide it. It's not disappeared. There's then a list of your hidden teams, but that way it's not cluttering up your screen. So I believe once you're in my team, this is, okay, I changed my mind. This should be the first thing that you see. It is like the discussion page. It's in the, if it isn't the first thing that pops up, it is in the general tab and it's under posts. So I don't do my homework in Teams. So some of you who have friends who have Mr. Amiga for class, he does do his homework right in Teams. So the reason I'm telling you this is just don't confuse your friends when they ask you like about Teams and Earth Science. Mr. Amiga and I do that kind of stuff differently. So I don't put your assignments in here like back in COVID days when everything had to be done in Teams. I don't do it that way. I do post every day in Teams though, and this is where I do it, is right here on this discussion page. So what I do is put a little post every day, which says, so first of all, the date, and they stay in order. So it'll always be the first ones at the top and they get older as you go down. So I put the date and then a little spiel about what we did, not like every little minute of the day, but just so you know the general idea of what we did on Wednesday, which was the first day of classes. I said we picked up the chapter 1 packet, the syllabus, and the ESRT. What we did with that, we went over the syllabus and introduced the ESRT. I then try to do this, and I think I always do, but this is where it might get messed up, is I try to make the homework always in bold capital letters. If it's not in bold capital letters, it's still written there. It still says homework, so it's just not quite as easy to see. So last Wednesday, your homework was to get the syllabus signed, which by the way, was technically due today. Has anyone not turned it in that has it with them? If you do, make sure it gets in there. Then I put a link to the YouTube video that I record. So like right now I'm recording the lesson. So on today's post, you'll see a video of what I'm doing right now. So it's right there. I do save them on Zoom and then put them on YouTube. So when you click on those, they take you right to YouTube. So you can watch these videos on your phone or your computer, whatever you're happier with. Now, what do I expect you to do with these videos? Some of you may never watch a single one and you'll be fine. Why I do this is because when you're absent, I don't want to take a few minutes, it's only a couple minutes. In 40 minutes, 4 minutes is 10% of the class. So those times add up. So I hate taking 4 minutes to tell you what we did yesterday. So when you're absent, and instead of asking me, hey, Mrs. Ritz, what I missed yesterday, or even if you do ask me this, my answer will be, it's all posted on Teams. So this way you know what we picked up, what we did, what was for homework, and then that link to the video is there because as you guys might remember, like when we were doing those notes on page 2, it was 7 vocab words. 7 vocab words should have only taken a few minutes, but I made it take the whole class period. Because in that class period, we discussed back and forth, we did some examples. If I was just to hand you those notes, you would miss out on that extra learning that we didn't write anything for. So that's why I do like to post the video. Now, do you have to watch it? No, you might miss something, but that is what happens when you're absent sometimes. Sometimes you miss stuff. I recommend watching the video. When do you have to watch the video? If you are homesick, just like any other person, I don't expect you to do any schoolwork. You're homesick for a reason. So what you would do is you'd come in, what did I miss? Check teams. In this case, you would then have that turn in any work you missed the next day. Or if, like, for example, on Friday. So when you say, what did I miss? And I say check teams, said we went over homework. So that means you had homework that you didn't show me. So that means you need to show me that homework that we went over, which was page 4. And then you can see you got homework on Friday, which was page 5. So that page 5, if anybody was absent on Friday, is not due for them until tomorrow. Does that make sense? If you are a person who doesn't like getting behind when they're absent, I try to post these during my planning period or my lunch period by 9th period. So if you don't like getting behind, you're always welcome if you're absent to watch the video either during the school day or that night that you missed. Do you have to? No, that's a personal choice. And then just show me your homework just like everybody else does. Questions? I do have my own YouTube channel, so if you don't want to go through Teams, you could just like and subscribe to my channel. I already have 44 subscribers. You could be lucky number 45. I could get my numbers up. Okay, but it's there. It's easy to search. My page is just Mrs. Ritz, so it pops right up. Questions about Teams? Were you all able to log in? Okay, how about this? Anybody not able to log in? We talked about you already. So anybody else? The other thing I want to make sure is that you are all able to log into PowerSchool. Now, some of you already know, I don't need to check this. If you don't already have the app on your phone, so let's do this. Either grab your own phone if you do PowerSchool on your phone, or I want to make sure if you don't do PowerSchool on your phone, I want to make sure you know how to do it on the computer. So if you're a phone person, grab your phone, log into PowerSchool. If you don't, we need to go to PowerSchool through the homepage here. And I want to make sure all of you know your login. My kids, so speaking from a parent side, the app on the phone is perfect. The app, well, we also recommend putting on your notifications so you can see when your grade changes. I kind of want you guys keeping an eye on your grades, not just for yourself, but sometimes you gotta keep an eye on me. You know how easy it is for a teacher, like if a test was worth 50 points, or if a test was worth 10 points, or a homework was worth 10 instead of the default 100. Do you know how easy it is, instead of putting a 10 out of 10, put a 10 out of a 100? That is a super easy, very common mistake for teachers. And sometimes I might not even notice I screwed up, but you will. If your grade goes from a 90 to a 70, and you're like, oh, that doesn't seem right, just send me a quick email and I will change it. Don't hesitate, because there's a bunch of other people then who aren't, either one, didn't notice, or two, aren't willing to tell me. So I would rather get 10 emails saying, Mrs. Ritz, my grade's messed up, than to get no email and then everybody's grade get messed up. I am not perfect, guys. I will make mistakes. So there's that. Did everybody know how to get in PowerSchool? Everybody in? Anybody who needs help, because I can call Mrs. Slocum right now and get your PowerSchool password. That's I'm telling you this to give you a chance to get help without interrupting a class period. Everybody knows how to get into PowerSchool. Perfect. Well, then we're done with our computers. So we're done with that. We're going to start by going over the homework, then doing one new thing. Second period, we discovered we couldn't get as far as I'd hoped. So really your homework that's listed on the board over here, page 8, number 4, we may or may not get to that in class, but if we don't, it's a homework. I also put up here that we're gonna have a quiz on Wednesday. The quiz on Wednesday, when I put OIP, that's observation, inference, prediction. So the stuff we've been doing, the stuff your homework we're about to go over, and then just some very basic graphing questions, which is what we're going to start reviewing today. So we're gonna start by opening up to page where you already should be, I'm assuming, page 5 for your homework. I think I mentioned this to your class, but let's see, do you remember the number 1 rule of earth science, or did I not talk about this at all? All right, number 1 rule of earth science. Little backstory. The people who write the Regents exam, I refer to them as Regents people, are actually jerks. The Regents people are jerks, and why they have to be jerks, I don't know, I will never understand. But what I mean, and you guys have taken a couple Regents exams, is that they sometimes write tricky questions. And I think it's stupid. Why would you try and purposely trick students? I think it's the meanest thing you could ever do, but they do. I don't like it, but they don't care what I think. You guys might care what I think, but they don't. So part of me teaching you this year is not only teaching you the actual science, but teaching you how to read Regents questions. And the number 1 rule for earth science in any Regents class, and really life in general, is to read all the words and do what they say. So I know most of you did not read this first line that says questions, choose the word or statement that best answers the question. I know you didn't read that. I know it was just simple directions, and I know you probably did just fine without reading that. But my question is, would it have killed you to read it? No, it took me all of like a third of a second. It doesn't take long to read all of the words. In that case, it wouldn't have mattered if you didn't read it, but sometimes it does. And that first question is a time when reading questions is pretty important. So it says, using a ruler to measure the length of a stick is an example of. Here's how I like to go over homework. Can you show me if you answered 1, 2, 3, or 4? Can everybody do this? Doesn't matter if you're right or wrong. It's for me to know where you're at. So could you guys all right now, 1, 2, 3, or 4 for answer 1? Okay, it looks like most of you got it right. It is number 1. A use of a ruler is for extending the sense of sight by using an instrument. Can I show you how the Regents people tried to trick you? They know that humans are pretty lazy for the most part. Not just teenagers, but everybody. But teenagers especially. Sorry, guys. Have you ever just read the first word of a sentence to try and figure out the answer? In that case, what would your answer have been? 3. Is that correct? No, you do not use a ruler to measure the rate of change of the stick by making an inference. But see how they purposely made it so that a lot of kids would have automatically picked that. So the number 1 rule of earth science this year and life in general is to read all the words and do what they say. By the way, sometimes reading the words includes reading a picture. In this case, not so much, but sometimes if there's a picture there, you need to read it. So you kind of got to look at it and try and figure out what it's trying to tell you. Let's keep going. Which action can be performed most accurately only using the human senses? Which one did you pick? 1, 2, 3, or 4? Looking around, most of you did correct. It is counting the 28 shells from a beach. Everything else would have required an instrument. So what instrument would you have used for number 1? Tearing sheets of paper into squares whose measure 1 centimeter. That would have been a ruler. What instrument would you have used to adding 10 grams of salt to a cup of water? Could be a measuring cup, 10 grams. That's a scale. So that would be a scale. And measuring the air pressure of the room, does anybody know? That's called a barometer. So that's what that question was trying to do. Yeah, counting, you still have to use your brain, but you don't need to use an instrument. Number 3 is the first time I think reading all the words and doing what they say was important. Be honest with yourself. How many people skipped those 2 lines right there? Yeah, I know this. And that's why I keep this question. That's why I ask about it. That's why I say it. What did you think those 2 lines were, Phoenix? Oh, you thought they were directions, didn't you? Yeah. Just like you probably didn't read this set of directions either. Yeah, I know that that's what people do. That's why I talk about this. These do look like directions, and you guys know enough that they often are directions. And then here's where the actual question begins. So you probably read this one, right, Phoenix? You read the path of the ash cloud was most probably determined by. Yeah, oh, good. I'm glad you read that. It's hard to tell how it was determined without reading these, though. This wasn't directions. This was kind of like some backstory for the question. So this is where I'm saying read all the words and do what they say. So it says the map below shows a path of an ash cloud that resulted from the Mount St. Helens volcanic eruption. The map was developed from satellite photographs. Then the question says the path of the ash cloud was most probably determined by. Well, what did it get determined by? What did the reading just tell us? A satellite photograph. So is a satellite photograph a hypothesis, an inference, observation, or a theory? It is an observation. So this was an observation. The photograph was like an instrument. The satellite taking a picture was like an instrument. So I see a bunch of people changing your answer. Can I ask, please, if you don't mind, what did you pick? What did you pick? Okay. What'd you pick? You too? Oh, okay. You were putting a star. Got it. I knew a bunch of you would pick inference. Now you admitted you didn't read. Did you read? Okay. So they did this again on purpose. Have you guys ever seen a map that kind of looks like this map? Yeah. Do you know a map? Do you know what it's usually of? The maps I see that look like this are hurricane prediction maps. When a hurricane is like forming in the Atlantic, they typically make a map that shows where that hurricane might go. So for example, one that's over here, they might draw a map that kind of looks like this, like there's the probable path. But in that case, is that an observation, an inference, or a prediction? That's a prediction. It's predicting where the hurricane would go. Here's why it's important to read the words. Here they said this is a map of the ashes, not this is a map predicting or a map where they think it's going to go. They flat out said this is a map of it. Pretty interesting though. So it was a volcano back in the 80s that erupted here, and it sent ashes out into the sky, like ashes very similar to your like a fireplace ashes. Those ashes from way over here in Washington made it to us. How cool is that? Or how strange, or how amazing, however you want to think of that, is an eruption happened way over here and made it the impact of that made it to us. That's insane. Please appreciate that if you don't. It's pretty cool. Moving on. Number 4, an interpretation based off an observation is called, which number did you pick? You got it. That is an inference. That's like the definition of an inference. This one I do think required a little bit of thinking. While on a field trip to a large lake in New York State, an observer recorded 4 statements about this lake. Which statement is most likely an inference? So a guess based on observations. Which one did you pick? Please show me with your fingers. I'm waiting for a couple more people to join us in the fun. Thank you, guys. That is the guess. I helped a couple of people who were stuck between 1 and 4 as the answer. When they say this, the surface temperature of the lake is 18.5. That's not a guess. What would they have done to know that? They would have used a thermometer, and that's still an observation. Finally, these last two, which are very similar. I kept these two almost identical questions because it shows how the region's people, there's only so many ways we can ask about stuff. Here's how they can change the wording just a little bit and change up the question. So a grouping of objects or events based on similar characteristics is called classification. I saw those answers. And then we take that word and kind of go the other way. A student classifies several objects. The classification should be based on, what'd you guys pick? 3 on observations. So those two questions were very similar, just rearranged. Questions on any of those? So the way I went through that, reading every answer. In this case, I didn't cross off any wrong answers, but that's always a good choice as well. All right, let's get started. We get out at 21, so we have a decent amount of time. Oh, we did not go over the answers to this page. I checked most of yours, but I do want to make sure you guys have the correct answers from the scientific notation that we ended Friday on. So I have all the answers written down somewhere, so I don't have to do them off the top of my head. Maybe. All right. So we did that first one together. What'd you get for 250 million? What was that? Times 10 to the 8. Whoa. And how about 4,500,000,000 people in the world? What's that one? Somebody, I think that was Drake who just answered them. Phoenix, what do you got? You got it. 4.5 times 10 to the 9th. I'm going to go ahead and do this one because this one threw off a lot of people. And to be honest, this isn't a big enough number that most of the time you would not put this number in scientific notation. But if you do, you still follow the same rules. Same as up here, you put the decimal point in between the first two numbers. So in this case, it's 1.0. If you did leave off the 0, this year it's not a big deal. Chemistry, it's a big deal. So I would just get in the habit of just doing it this way. So we still do the times 10. We got to see how many places. So if it was here, to get here, that's 1, 2, 3, 4. So 10,000 is the same as saying 1.0 times 10 to the 4th. All right, miles in a light year. Honestly, without thinking, I don't really know that number off the top of my head, and I don't want to figure it out. What's the answer to that one? How do you write that in scientific notation? Somebody else. I checked most of your answers the other day. They're right. What do you got? What do you got, Remy?
1.5 times 10 to the 12.
You got it. Amps of electrons to make 1 amp of electricity. Yeah, Trenton? 6.242. Did you guys include all those numbers?
Yes.
If they're not zeros, you do have to keep them, but it still works the same way. You still put a decimal between the first 2 numbers in the line and counted how many places that got moved over, and how many places did you say, Trenton? I cut you off. Times 10 to the 18th. That is correct, by the way. Dollars the US president makes per year. How would we write that one? Correct. Now going the other way. So you take the number 6.38 and you move that decimal 6 places. Because this is a positive, we move the decimal to the right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this is where the decimal is going to go. And I need to fill in these empty spots with zeros. So that's 1, 2, 3, comma, 1, 2, 3, comma. Is that correct? So that's Yeah, it is. So that is 6,380,000. So that's 6,380,000. I am not even going to pretend I know this number again. So we take that and we move the decimal 19 places. 1, 2, 3. And then there'll be 16 zeros. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. And the last one, it should be 22,110. Scientific notation sound familiar? Got it. All right. All right, we're going to do some graphing, which should also sound familiar. We're going to do a lab on this, so we're not going to spend a whole lot of time. In fact, we're not even going to graph it in class. We're just going to go through the basics in class. And then we're going to do graphing in lab where there's enough, where we can kind of help you guys more personally if you need issues instead of trying to tackle that in class. So we're just going to get the basics down today, including some basic questions on page 8. You guys might end up with a tiny bit more than question 4, but there's only 4 questions, so it's not that big a deal. So we're right here on this reading. So remember I said I don't give you a textbook, but if there's ever a time I feel like a textbook would come in handy, I copy and paste it into here. So that's what I did. I copied a textbook page and put it here. So we can read it together. You can go back and find the information you need. It's all right here. This is why I don't feel the need to give you a textbook. Let's do it. Which in fact, it says, let's graph. Ready? Sure.
Graphing is an important procedure used by scientists to display the data as collected during a controlled experiment. Line graphs must be constructed correctly and accurately portray the data collected. Many times, the wrong construction of the graph detracts from the acceptance of the individual hypothesis. The graph contains 5 major parts. Think back to last. The title, independent variable, dependent variable, the scale for each variable, and the legend. The title depicts what the graph is about. By reading the title, the reader should get an idea about the graph. It should be a concise statement placed above the graph. All right, so the first variable. The independent variable is a variable that can be controlled by the experiment. Because last year, I think we said I controlled as an independent variable. Usually includes things like time, dates, hours, minutes, depth, feet, meters, temperature, Celsius. This variable is placed on the x-axis or the horizontal axis. Maybe you need to underline or highlight that part that says x-axis.
Let's do that.
Horizontal. Otherwise, it'll backwards.
This. So, and you guys should remember that this is the X and this is a Y, just for a quick review there.
A dependent variable is a variable that is directly affected by the independent variable. It is the result of what happened because of the independent variable. Example, how many oxygen bubbles are dependent on the depth of the water? This variable is placed on the y-axis, or the up and down. The scales for each variable. When constructing a graph, one needs to know where to plot the points representing the data. In order to do this, a scale must be employed to include all data points. This must also take up a conservative amount of space. It is not suggested to have a plan.
I know I had the trouble this morning
It's
too.
not just to have something on scale, making the graph too hard to manage. The scale should start with 0
A run
and
on.
climb based on intervals with multiples of 2, 5, 10, 20, 25, 50, or 100. The scale numbers will be dictated by your data. And lastly, the legend is a short descriptive narrative concerning the graph's data. Should be short and concise, placed under the graph.
Okay, so I had originally planned that we're gonna make a graph, but like I said, we're gonna do that in class. Here's the data we would have collected, and like it was talking about in the reading, it was talking about the number of oxygen bubbles produced by 2 different plants, plant A and plant B, at different depths. One of these variables, so either depth or number of oxygen bubbles, is the independent variable. From the reading, which one of these, what is the independent variable? Let's start there. Yeah, what is, let's give a definition first. Yeah, I like that. It's the one I can control. That helps that it starts with the letter I. I can control. And Trent was right. The depth is the one I can control. How can I control the depth? Say it again. Okay, so I am the one who's moving the plant. The reading talked about time being an independent variable often. How can I control time? Like, I don't get to like change how fast the clock goes. How do I get to control the time? Or the person doing the experiment for that matter? Yeah, so when you're doing the experiment, you are the one controlling either how long the experiment goes on for, or how often you take the measurements. So that's what it means by I controlling time. You're the one controlling how often you measure or when you measure, not you speeding up or slowing down the clock. You can't do that. So if that's the independent, then the number of oxygen bubbles is the dependent. So someone explain why the number of oxygen bubbles is the dependent variable, so not Trenton. How is that the dependent? First off the bat, you can't control the plant. You have no control over a plant. You can't say to the plant, please make 10 air bubbles right now. You don't have that kind of power. You have the power only to move it up and down. So that's a perfect explanation of why that's the dependent variable. How come there's two different dependent variables? How would that work on a graph? Two different lines, one line for A, one line for B. What would you have to do then if you have two different plants and two different lines? Label them, or two different colors, or one's dotted and one's solid, anything like that. All right, so I am changing up your homework. Your homework is going to be 1 through 4, but if you were just paying attention, numbers 1 and 2, we already did the answers to that. Number 4 is calculating the average. Now, I already said earlier this year, like last week, that anytime you have to do math in my class, the formulas on the front page of the reference table. Here's formulas or equation. If you notice, there is no average formula. And the Regents people are assuming you know how to do averages. Let's make sure you remember how. So the first part of question 4 is finding the average depth. Then, by the way, they want you to do the average bubbles for A and the average bubbles for B. Do you guys remember how to do averages? What's the first step of finding the average here? Add them up. So to find the average, you take these numbers and add them. And that will give you a pretty big number. I'm not telling you the number. Then what's the second part of finding averages? Divide by however many numbers there were. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So you take that number and you divide it, in this case, by 7. And that's how you get the average. Again, I am taking it for granted that you just needed a refresher class in that, or you didn't even need that. If you need more help than that just gave you, you got to see us personally. Okay, so you still have a couple minutes. If I were you, some of you particularly, I would like you just to do questions 1 through 4. We already talked about the answers to 1 and 2. I just helped you with number 4. I'm making you try to figure out a good title all on your own. Again, not rocket science, not overworked tonight, but please get these 4 questions done. Quiz on Wednesday.